Before 2008, we were unregulated.
Yeah.
The contractual relationship was still with the vendor, but we had this thing called caveat emptor, which was buyer beware. And so, of course, back then, buyers had to buy properties and all of the due diligence was on them. The agent was only working in the vendor's interest and was basically like, no, you've got to research the property and what you find is up to you.
Almost like no information supplied at all. Right?
So it was no responsibility, no care.
Right, it's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
It's only 15 years ago.
Welcome to the LoweDown, Wellington's #1 real estate podcast. We're on episode 13. I'm back with my good mate, Adam. He's a real estate investor, real estate agent, and a friend of mine. And we're going to talk today about whether real estate agents are dodgy or not.
This could be a short episode.
Adam, episode 13. It's gone fast.
Episode 13, I can't believe it. Yeah. We're just ploughing through them, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it's good fun. It's always good to have a chat. And so I just want to get your opinion before we start getting really into it. Do you think that real estate agents deserve the reputation, general reputation of, perhaps being at the bottom end of the rung in terms of, people to trust out there?
Well, so you're assuming that that's where they are. That's where their reputation is, right? So you think that their reputation of real estate agents is pretty low. I suppose traditionally I agree they probably are, right? Well, they have been. Do they deserve it? Well, I suppose I think that people don't get that reputation without a reason.
Yep.
Right.
I mean,
so on that basis, perhaps real estate agents do deserve that bad reputation, or at least the questionable reputation, at least historically.
I mean, I'll give you my opinion on that, and that is...
I thought you might.
Yeah. Not shy of an opinion, am I? I think there's two things going on. I think one of them is that, the real estate transaction is very emotional, right? So, and there's so much money at stake. They talk about being one of the most stressful things you ever go through, up there with death and divorce and all that stuff. So, and of course, no one thinks that. They think they're going to sell the house. They don't think they're going to be stressed.
What's the big deal about that?
What's the big deal? It's not until the sign goes up that all of that gravity of being exposed, having your house exposed.
It's a huge amount of effort just getting ready.
Yeah.
There's a lot of work goes in before the sign goes up.
Yeah.
Vast amount.
Yeah. And so then you've got something where the outcome is unknown, is very deeply uncertain. It's family, food, fire, shelter, deeply human connection with your house. And then you've got someone else in control of that. And then when on the buying side, you've got the emotion of, say, buying a first home, or it's going to be the family, food, fire, shelter for you in the future. So this is a very highly emotionally charged transaction.
Massively emotional.
And you've got someone in the middle who's having to wear two hats. Now, I would say there's two things. I think real estate agents are potentially unfairly pegged as being, a dodgy, let's just say, because of the emotion involved, and because people will, read into things and they'll get overly stressed and they'll see things where things aren't actually wrong.
Might be quite suspicious.
And then on the other side of that, real estate agents have a huge incentive to get a deal done, and it is a very transactional game, and so therefore, real estate agents won't be immune to their own incentives coming into play, and occasionally doing things that are in their own incentives. And so if you sell a house, you're going to have, you've got, say you have 10 offers on a property, you've got 9 people that are upset, and so you can never.
That's obviously a very good situation. 10 offers on a property.
Yes, well, it happens, right?
It certainly does.
Yeah.
It's not all the time, but yeah, by all means it does. Yeah, and then, absolutely right. You've got 9 buyers who have missed out, and who potentially are looking for someone to blame. Right? Yeah. And they might find all sorts of things that really were not motivated by bad intentions, but were interpreted that way potentially by those buyers. Yeah.
And I think the transactional nature of it does attract a certain person, in the sense that, most good real estate agents love the deal. They love, they're sort of the hunter. They love finding the deal, getting the deal together, bringing two parties together. They get a kick off that.
Sure.
And not everyone's going to connect with that personality, and that's fair.
That's true.
So I think when you add all of that up, I think that in my mind, that those are the things that lead to, we see those lists that people produce of the, trusted professions in real estate. So it's not usually the lowest, but it's definitely down towards the bottom end.
Yeah, I think when there are large amounts of money involved, and as you say, if you look at it completely clinically, just from a financial incentives perspective, the agent's incentivized to close the deal, not necessarily to close the deal at the absolute best price. I mean, real estate agents are human beings, and no human being is immune to occasionally behaving badly when under a certain incentivized situations, right? So certainly it is easy for a real estate agent to cut corners, to take the easy route, because then they might cut the price short by 10, 20, 30, 40,000, and it doesn't make a big difference to their fee. It takes a lot of effort to work that extra, those extra hours to get that extra $5, 10, 15, 20, $30,000, and a lot of agents might think, I can't be bothered. So it is important to make sure you choose someone who you really trust, and you trust it's going to be in their corner. I mean, I often say, real estate agency is not rocket science. It's not brain surgery, is it?
It's good for you and I.
Well, speak for yourself. But where was I going? It's not rocket science. It's not brain surgery. But nonetheless, the cost of making a mistake or the cost of messing it up is still quite high, right? Not life or death, but it's a lot of dollars potentially. And so it's really important to make sure that you're confident that the agent's got your corner.
Yes.
Not only that they've got the skills, but it's not that hard to have the skills necessary. I think the bigger question is, can I trust this person that they're actually going to fight for me?
Yeah, I mean, I think the skills are nuanced. I think you're right. It's not complicated, but it is nuanced. It's about psychology, and I think if I think about my career, and I was 20 years in, I was selling houses a lot more proficiently for a lot better results on average than I was 20 years ago, or even 15 years ago. So there's an element of skill, a huge element of skill to getting the best result in the best time frame and understanding how to do that well. I think also, if you think about that tension between the buyer and seller, I mean, you mentioned getting the best price. One other side to it too is our fiduciary responsibility is with the vendor. And that's written into the Act. It's probably a good thing to probably fill in the audience on is obviously before 2008 we were unregulated. And the contractual relationship was still with the vendor, but we had this thing called caveat emptor, which was buyer beware. And so of course back then, buyers had to buy properties and all of the due diligence was on them. The agent was only working in the vendor's interest and was basically like, no, you've got to research the property and what you find is up to you.
Almost like no information supplied at all. The agent and the vendor, or the agent at least, could know very little about the property that they're selling. It's all up to the buyers. I mean, obviously the vendor would know quite a bit about their property, but they're not obliged to actually make disclosures.
So it was no responsibility, no care.
Right, it's like the Wild West.
Yeah.
It's only 15 years ago.
It was. But even when I look back then and think about how bad really was it, I would say, I think we'll talk a bit about whether or not the regulation's been good or bad and how it's affected the game. But I think if you take 200,000 people, which is a lot in New Zealand terms, maybe you take 20,000 people, the same amount of real estate agents will be inherently dodgy as the same amount of doctors or teachers or whatever. I mean, most people are inherently good, and so even back then, I think there were some real issues in terms of the transparency between the vendor, the agent, and the owner, which we're talking about. But I also think, in my career, I didn't see a huge amount of things I thought were inherently, if any, from memory, I can't remember anything I looked at and pointed and said, oh, that's inherently unethical. I'm sure there was stuff that happened. And so 2008 we got regulated, government came in, and the REA was established, my understanding is they were established to promote and protect the interests of consumers in respect of transactions that relate to real estate, and to promote public confidence in the performance of real estate agency work. So in your opinion, have they achieved that?
I think they've made a lot of ground. I do think that on average, the ethical standards, if you like, and the practices of real estate agents, the whole industry is definitely better. well, put it this way: there's less variation. There's more consistently decent quality, is what I think. I suppose, I mean, it almost makes it a bit more difficult to stand out as an agent potentially when the standard of professionalism is higher. I do think that it is kind of cleaning up the industry, and the reputation will follow, but it's a slow thing to move.
To some degree, it also cleans up the vendor's behaviour too, right?
Yes.
Which I think, for me, I mean, if I look at the biggest changes, I think that transparency, it's just incredible. The onus on the agent to obtain disclosure from the vendor now is just, and it's really intense, and it's a good thing. I think that's a wonderful change because buyer beware was ridiculous, right? I mean, it's one of the largest transactions you'll make in your life. Yeah. As you and I know,
no obligation to actually inform the people what it is they're buying.
And real estate's way more complex. Like the transactions are way more complex than people realise. The risks and the things that could be wrong with houses and the compliance around them, all those things, especially in body corporates, but even freehold land can be quite. There's a lot of things that can go wrong, and most properties would have a disclosure when you say. I mean, it's very rare these days you ever say no disclosures.
Well, I mean, it's a funny thing, isn't it? I mean, sometimes people say to me, "Are there any disclosures?" This is the day before the campaign closes. They've got to make their offer. Are there any disclosures? Well, we've supplied to you comments from the vendor. We've supplied to you a LIM report. We've supplied to you a builder's report. We've supplied to you all sorts of things. Work that's been done to the property. Are there any disclosures? Well, we've just disclosed an absolute ton of stuff to you. What they mean is, are there any specific items that you want to point out that are faults?
That's important though. I think it's just passing over information. I mean, it can be overwhelming for, imagine first home buyer, be overwhelming, big stack of documents. And I think...
Yeah. So the whole question of, well, where do you draw the line? What's a disclosure and what's not a disclosure,
Well, if it's material. If it's material to someone's decision making, right?
But everyone's different, Craig, Yeah. I mean, what's material to me is very different from what's material to you. And what's material to me is very different from what's material to a first home buyer that's never done this before. And even amongst first home buyers, I mean, everyone's got a different view of what's material or not. And as you will know, for a lot of times in our trainings and so on that we do every year, one message that's come through loud and clear to me, at least, is it's not up to us to determine what's material. It's up to us to supply all the information, and then you just can't withhold anything, and then the determination of what's important or not, that's up to the purchaser.
Yeah, although we have to draw purchasers' attention to things that we believe may be material to them, and so that's where you're getting at. And that first thing is we have to pull out all the things that we think as a reasonably competent licensee,
isn't it? It's quite subjective.
Yeah, well, you get better at it though. I mean, I think the industry overall has gotten better at that.
Definitely. In terms of making the disclosures, supplying the information, without a doubt. I mean, interestingly, we're talking here about our real estate agents dodgy. We could have another podcast about our vendors dodgy, or our buyers dodgy. I mean, anywhere in a transaction or anything where there's a large amount of money at stake, it can elicit some pretty bad behaviour.
Well, this goes right back to the start of the conversation. I agree with that. It's a great point. We talk about whether real estate agents are dodgy, and it's to my point about take 20,000 people, and a certain amount of them will be unethically bad, like really bad. Now, if you take just your average person, which most real estate people are, and you take your average buyer and seller, I mean, we watch buyers and sellers operate in their own incentives, and they do it almost subconsciously, and they make decisions that are bad for the buyer or bad for the vendor. Every day we see that. So real estate agents are no different. We're all human.
That's right. We're all human beings.
And the reality is, psychologists have studied all the bias and all the human interest, how that drives our decision making. And anyone who doesn't believe that, thinks that a certain set or a certain group of people just through their profession are any worse on that front, just don't understand humans, right? Like I mean, the reality is
that's right.
Everyone
that's
is
right.
in the same boat.
One of our favourite mentors was it Warren Buffett, who said, "Show me the incentive, and I'll show you the behaviour."
Exactly. Yeah. That's right.
And that's just human.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the rules, of course, is that if there are known facts about a property that are material and are hidden faults that wouldn't be apparent necessarily to a buyer walking through the property, we have to disclose those. And if a vendor instructs us not to disclose a material fact like that, we can't work for them.
Yep.
Right?
We have to cancel the agency, yeah.
Now, that's not something that happens often. Would that be fair?
Well, it doesn't happen often, but we often have to remind vendors
yes.
of that
No, that's,
to get them to disclose.
That's commonplace.
Yeah.
Right, that's quite common. Well, not necessarily like in a threatening way, like, I don't know, if we do that, then I can't work for you.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's more like, no, the rules say we must do this.
Yes.
You know, I mean, I can only recall one time where a vendor has said to me, and they didn't say to me. I asked the question, how about this bathroom here? Where did this, how did this fit in? Oh, this was a laundry cupboard or something, and I put a shower in there. And I said, okay, so you get a consent for that. Oh no, we didn't get a consent for that. Gave them advice on the options of how to handle this. In the end, it came back to me and said, look, the lawyer has advised me, don't disclose it. I mean, a lawyer's dodgy, and in the end, I mean, I had to tell them I can't do the work. I can't work for you. Now I've only done that once. I've only had to do that once. But so when there's a large amount of money at stake, human beings can behave badly.
Oh, and the amount of times I've seen buyers have uncovered something, and then we've shown a vendor, and they're and it's just
I forgot about that.
Yes, and it's quite obvious that they just wanted to bury that, and it didn't come up in the disclosure process. So there is still risk. Yeah. And the reality is, this is the thing that I find, right, is that if you think about it, we should know what we're selling. Everyone should know what they're selling. As an agent or as an owner, we should know what's selling, and we should be telling a buyer should know what they're buying. That is absolutely how it should work. And I think my policy is no surprise. I have a no surprise policy. It's why I love getting building report and a LIM report prior to going to market, because I think if we do all the discovery up front, it's not that we're trying to hide anything, not we're trying to get a good building report. It's we want to know what is there so we can deal with it. We can disclose it.
Well, we can make decisions about how to respond to these things before we go to market and be prepared. Even if it's just knowing how to answer the questions or knowing how to how to respond to those. Or you don't have to do the work if it's a fault in the property, but you can get quotes, and these sorts of things take time. And there's already a lot of pressure that the buyers are under, and so for them to have to run around and get a roof quote at the same time as all the other homework that they're doing in a 2.5 week period, that's getting demanding.
And it's in everyone's interest, right? Because the reality is, if a buyer finds something 3 days before tender's closed that no one knew about, it just ruins the deal. The deal's gone.
The thing that people hate most is uncertainty.
Exactly.
So the more clarity, more certainty you can provide, it works in the vendor's interest, because the more information is there, the less risk there is, the less uncertainty there is there, the more engagement you get.
Adam, if we go to complaints, you think about the REA came in 2008. I think it came into force about 2010.
Yes.
Since then, any sort of vendor, buyer, member of the public, whatever, can complain to the Real Estate Agents Authority about a real estate agent. What is your guess on the flow of complaints and how that might have changed in the last 13 years?
Since it started? Oh, goodness me. I would imagine that the amount of complaints have probably increased. But that's not because I think the behaviour has gotten worse, but I think as the public knowledge that the ability to make the complaint is there. And it's free, isn't it?
I believe so. I just have to be honest with you. I'm ambushing you a little bit on that question, because I did some research prior So this is the trend line.
Oh, you've ambushed me. You've proven me wrong.
It's the only way I can do it.
I love you, Craig.
I was surprised as well.
Right.
So I knew you'd answer the same way as I would.
Is that what you thought also?
Yeah, I thought so. I thought it would have. I just assumed that, as you pointed out, the friction to making a complaint has sort of gone down. More people would be aware of it. There's, I don't know. I just had this sort of gut feel, or maybe it would be, fairly consistent. But actually, if you look here, what I've got here, I've got three things. I've got the trend line. So you can see here back in 15-16, it was well over 550, and it's down, almost halved in the last 9 years.
It came down very quickly.
Very quickly.
I wonder what that's about. Is that just the maybe when people originally make a complaint, they get some initial feedback about it or something like that, and then there's a lot of people that change their mind in that conversation, and perhaps the REA themselves became clearer about what would constitute a valid complaint and what wouldn't.
I think
and so
more got
getting
thrown
better
out.
at cutting it off at the pass.
I agree with that. Yeah, I think there was a real learning. I remember that, actually. That's a great point. I remember. And if you go back to the bottom graph there, we'll put these graphs up on the screen for people. But the reality is that if you have a look there, these are tribunal outcomes, or ones that actually went fully through to the tribunal.
Yeah.
And you can see here that unsatisfactory conduct and no further action was much greater in 2012 and 13 and dropped way away. And you can see that, the no further action ones almost non-existent.
I can't actually tell which one's which. Sorry, mate.
Yeah, you need your glasses.
But, yeah.
Thanks
for that.
But the point is it's the dark blue one, and the printer hasn't done a great job of that there. But you can see towards the end there in 2023-24, there's no further actions when it goes to the tribunal, which means that
they're just cutting those complaints off at the pass.
Yeah, they're getting much better.
They're not even pass and go.
Not even pass and go.
Yeah, but also it's like 2023. What's it like 6 complaints, 7 complaints, 7 tribunal outcomes.
Yeah.
There's very few.
Yeah, I know.
So the ratio of actual complaints that get traction and reach a verdict, if you like, in the tribunal. The ratio of that to actual complaints in the front door is minuscule. The vast majority of these complaints are totally spurious.
Yeah, and it comes from and of course running an agency we've seen them like every other agency in town, and it comes from that emotional element largely. People are and I mean poor communication, or they feel that something went wrong, they didn't get they were misled on the price, or something that's
when you've just paid a huge amount of money and you've put this huge amount of effort in, and it's a fulfillment of a massive dream, like whether it's your first home or upgrading a home or whatever. And you find something out, and you think, "Wow, was that?" You can get suspicious, and start to second guess yourself, and I don't know, your mind plays funny tricks on you at night, doesn't it?
Yeah.
As you're lying in bed there, and then you wake up in the morning and go, "Damn it, I'm going to make this complaint," right?
But you think about the tens of thousands of transactions done in the country per year.
Oh yeah,
how many that lead to a complaint? How many of those complaints get upheld?
Yeah.
Very small, right?
And so, but the creation of the Act and the Real Estate Agents Authority itself will be having a big influence on actually reducing these complaints by cleaning the behaviour up. And that presumably was the entire point.
Exactly. And agents have got much better at that compliance, which is the active tightening.
That's right.
And therefore,
I mean, the good players out there will always have been good. But as I sort of indicated before, I think there's way less variability in the standards and the behaviour generally. So it would be taking the bottom of the market and just bringing it up to par.
Agree.
Won't it? Yeah.
And I mean, we're really proud of the fact that we've never had a complaint upheld once in the 9 years of Lowe and Co.'s existence. So
and there's a vast amount of the policies, procedures, best practice, all of the salespeople here are, monitored and trained on what is the Lowe and Co way. It's not like the Wild West where it's just a bunch of independent contractors doing what they like.
And so, what's the bad side of all this regulation? I mean, nothing. Everything has a trade-off.
Yeah, I mean, every sword has two edges, and so I think that the only thing really is that it just adds a cost.
Sucks productivity.
Isn't there? Is there anything else? But nothing's free. If you want the industry to be cleaned up, it's not going to happen without some cost. So there's a bit of bureaucracy. There's a bunch of procedure that we have to follow, and none of us love that. But that's the price you pay for having an industry, and that's what we want. I suppose at the end of the day, what we want is an industry that it has a good reputation, where I think the real estate sales is deemed a profession in the same way as accountancy or legal work and so on.
Lawyers are actually like below us.
Lawyers
on that list.
definitely, the lawyers are down there.
Yeah, my wife's a lawyer, so I'd say if the boat's sinking, you can save us last.
The real estate agent and the lawyer. That sounds like a child story, a children's book.
So just to wrap up, Adam, do you think that, I think that's a really noble way of looking at it in terms of professionalising the industry, and, do you feel like real estate agents will ever be held in a higher regard than they are today? And how do you think the trend will go on that?
I do, because I think the last 10, 15 years it's definitely improved, and I mean this has got as much responsibility for that as anything. I think. And so I think that will probably continue, albeit at a slower rate, of course. Diminishing returns and all that. Yeah.
I think I agree. But I think while we'll never take the emotion out, we'll never take the fact that you won't please 100% of people 100% of the time in real estate.
Fully.
I think we have to believe in that. I mean, our mission at Lowe & Co is to lift people up through property, reinvest in the community, and do things that are heartfelt and show the good side of that real estate agents are actually out there to serve, not just self-interested.
There'll always be the exceptions to the rule, like we've talked about. There's
just like doctors and lawyers.
That's right, exactly right. Where there's a lot of money at stake, there is potential for some bad behaviour. Yeah.
That was LoweDown. Thank you very much for tuning in. Please like and subscribe, and we'll do it again next week.
Thank
you.
You.